This is the new 2022 Audi S3, and it's a fun little sports sedan. It's also totally new for the 2022 model year, redesigned from the old S3. This new one has over 300 horsepower, all-wheel drive, and a starting price of just under $50,000. And today, I'm going to review it. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era with free listings. You can list your cool car for free and auction it on Cars and Bids. And we've had some fantastic sales recently, including this Mercedes-AMG E63 S-Wagon sold for $108,000. This great Porsche Cayenne diesel sold for almost $38,000. We've done great with Cayennes. And this Audi TT brought $40,000. If you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast car from the modern era, the 1980s and up, Cars and Bids is the place to do it, with daily auctions and great selection at carsandbids.com. So let's talk S3. This one is all new, like I said, fully redesigned for the 2022 model year, and of course it's based on the Audi A3. Now, the S3 is only the pretty sporty one. If you want a real high-performance version of this car, that would be the RS3, but it's not out yet. Audi says later this summer or early fall. But the S3 isn't exactly slow. Like I said, over 300 horsepower, 306 to be precise, using the very same turbo four-cylinder you'll find in the Volkswagen Golf R. Also like the Golf R, the S3 comes standard with all-wheel drive, and the two cars have some pretty similar performance numbers, but there are some key differences, which I'll show you. And today, I'll also show you everything else. First, I'll take you on a thorough tour of the new S3 and show you all of its interesting quirks and features. Then I'll get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a DOUGSCORE. All right, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the S3, and one of the big things I want to start with is the fact that this car addresses a lot of the issues that I brought up as being negative points about the Golf R. I mentioned earlier that the cars share the same engine, they both have all-wheel drive, they're very similar, but this solves some of the Golf R's problems. One of my biggest issues with the Golf R was the materials quality in the interior. I didn't think it was really up to par for the price point. Well, the S3's is a lot better. You can see this interior, very high quality, very modern and luxurious. It looks very nice, and frankly, it fits in with a luxury car at this price point, at this level. It really looks kind of like what you'd expect in here. Now, it isn't perfect. There are still some areas that could use some improvement, like the dashboard. I guess this is cheap vinyl, but it really just kind of looks like plastic. It's not all that attractive. Same deal in the door panel. You have a little bit more plasticky, vinyl-y than I would like, but there are also some nice benefits, like these attractive seats with this like quilted stitched leather. Looks very good. You have some nice trim in places, some like silvers and gloss blacks that all look better than what you find in the Golf R. Now, another big benefit the S3 has over the Golf R is fixed climate controls. In the Golf R, the climate controls are integrated into the center screen, which isn't great, and it's especially not great in that car because the center screen usability is not really all that good, to be totally honest. In this car, you don't have to worry about center screen usability because the climate controls are fixed in place. You can see them here, buttons, switches, adjust the temperature, the airflow, all that stuff you'd normally use climate controls for. There are hard buttons, so you don't have to go into menus and screens in order to use your climate controls. That's another big plus of the S3 over the Golf R. And of course, there's another big benefit here, which is, frankly, the Audi badge. Even though these cars are relatively similar in a lot of ways, the Audi badge just carries more weight, carries more respect, more luxury connotations than the Volkswagen badge. And although a lot of car shoppers won't admit to themselves that's one reason they choose a luxury brand over a mainstream brand, it is. And the Audi badge is also helpful in making this car more appealing than the Golf R. And believe it or not, probably the biggest point in favor of the S3 is actually pricing. A lot of times when you're comparing a mainstream model to a luxury brand model that's based on that mainstream model, a luxury brand is way more expensive, but not in this case. A Golf R starts around $44,600 with shipping. This starts at $46,800 with shipping. everything. So this is only $2,000 more, and you get an Audi instead of a Volkswagen. You get an improved interior and improved tech, at least for the climate controls. So there's not really a huge drawback to choosing the S3 over the Golf R. Now, with that said, there are some benefits of the Golf R over the S3, and one is very obvious right back here. The S3 has a trunk, whereas the Golf R, of course, is a hatchback. Now, for some car enthusiasts, that ends the discussion right there, because a lot of car people prefer hatchbacks just generally to sedans, and they would pick the Golf R just because of that. But even if you're open to both body styles, of course, a hatchback is more practical than a sedan. It has more space in back for cargo, for stuff if you want to fold down the seats, and so the Golf has a little bit more practicality. And then there's the powertrain. These cars have the same engine, 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder, mated all-wheel drive, like I've mentioned, but the Golf R has a little bit more power, 315 horsepower in the Golf R versus 306 horsepower in the S3. And the Golf R has more torque. This car is at 295 pound-feet of torque. The Golf R is at 310 pound-feet. So there's an advantage for horsepower and torque with a Volkswagen. However, it's important to point out that acceleration times aren't really different between the two cars. Both of them are quoting in the mid 4-second range 0 to 60, which is very quick, and neither one seems to have a big advantage. But it is important to note that transmission is also a big differentiator between these cars. The S3 is only offered with a 7-speed dual-clutch automatic. The Golf R is also offered with the same transmission, but you can get a Golf R with a manual transmission if you want. So if you want a manual or if you want a hatchback, the Golf R is the one for you. Otherwise, I see a lot of benefit to the S3 over the Volkswagen. But anyway, next up, moving back inside the S3, I want to go over the rest of its quirks and features, starting with a rather unusual one on the door panel, and that would be the door handle that you pull to open the door, which is very strangely shaped. It's not a loop or like a traditional door handle. It almost looks like a jagged edge gun pointing down. I'm not really sure if you're supposed to lift from the bottom or from the top. It's just kind of a strange thing, but it does add some daring style to this interior. But anyway, next up, moving a little bit more inside, another unusual control, and here is the shift lever, which is actually more like a shift switch. You can see it here. You pull it back for D or drive, you push it up for R, reverse, neutral's in the middle, and then you access park by pressing this little rectangular button above all that. Sort of strange and unorthodox, but not as strange and unorthodox as the volume control in this car, which is here. You can see there's a circle with some controls, on, off, mute, next and previous track. So where's volume? Well, you slide your finger in a circle around this circle in order to turn the volume up or down. It's a very unusual control, but it's actually pretty easy to use once you figure it out. Just slide your finger around and the volume changes, and it's certainly better than having that integrated into the touchscreen or little tap, tap, tap buttons like in some cars. But anyway, next up, another interesting interior quirk would be the sunroof. Sunroof opens up just like in a normal car, nothing unusual there, but you can close this mesh sunshade when the sunroof is open. So you can have the sunroof open and wind blowing into the car, but then the mesh sunshade is closed. So you're getting shaded from the sun, but you're still getting the fresh air from the roof, which is pretty cool. I think only Volkswagen and Audi allow that, the sunshade to close when the sunroof is open, and actually I find myself enjoying it more and more every time I'm in one of these cars. Next up, another interesting quirk in this interior would be the fact that the interior itself is very angled. Take a look at the dashboard. You don't see any like sweeping curves here like in many modern cars. There's just angles everywhere. Straight horizontal and angles going side to side and hexagons, and everything is angled in here. And I guess it's to give it sort of an aggressive interior look, modern and maybe even a little bit sporty as opposed to sweeping curves. Those are for old people. In the S3, we have angles. And next up, another notable item in here, probably the only thing that is curved, the steering wheel. I love the steering wheel in this car. I love the little golf ball texture on the side, the part where you actually grab. This is kind of a hallmark of sporty Audis, and it's nice to see it in here too. It looks and feels pretty good. But anyway, next I want to go into the infotainment system. And I have to say, this is not my very favorite infotainment system in the entire car industry. For one thing, it can be a little bit slow to respond. You tap it and it takes a little longer than some screens which are a little bit more immediate. Also, the screen is a little little small. And so when you're on the home screen displaying 3 items at once, it's a little difficult to really see everything in all of them. It's all kind of compact a little bit, but it does work relatively well. It's reasonably intuitive to get between various different items, to pair phones, or put in a navigation destination, or go to settings, pretty much anything you might want. It's relatively easy in this system, but again, not my very favorite, though I am just happy they didn't integrate the climate controls. However, any complaints about this center screen are instantly forgiven when you go to use the gauge cluster screen. Audi kind of pioneered gauge cluster screens like 5 years ago, full screen gauge clusters, and they still do it better than basically anybody else. This screen is wonderfully configurable. You can adjust the view to prioritize basically whatever you want. If you want to see the speed or the tachometer, you can see that a little larger, or if you want to see other things like music, phone, whatever, you can choose what you want to display largely, and of course you can always choose to have the map displayed right there in the gauge cluster. Full screen, full color, full resolution. It's a fantastic thing, and it's really, really easy to use. And it also cuts down on some of your use of the center infotainment screen, since so much good information is right in front of you. You don't have to use the kind of lesser screen, in my opinion, quite as often. By the way, one interesting quirk worth noting in this screen, I still love that Audi refers to the trip odometers not as like trip A or trip B, but instead short-term memory and long-term memory. Giving some personification to the gauge cluster screen trip odometer situation in your S3. Also interesting in this vicinity, I like the fact that you have a hidden storage compartment over here. To the left of the steering wheel, you see there's this little panel. You open it up, and that's where you can store stuff. And it's actually pretty big and relatively useful. You get a little ticket at a parking garage, or you have your parking garage card, stuff like that. You just want to keep over there. You have a pocket just for the driver. It's kind of nice. But anyway, next we move into the back seat of the S3, and I have to say, it's pretty small. The back seat is not especially sizable back here. I moved the front seat up to get back here. My knees are still pushing into it, digging into it. My head is right up against the ceiling, but that's all pretty common in a vehicle like this. Ultimately, these S3s are mainly purchased by single people or couples who aren't going to be transporting people, and especially adults, in the back seat very often. They want it here just for occasional use, and this back seat does work for occasional use, or for kids, adults for short trips. It's not something you'd want to use often for adults, but it works in a pinch. Anyway, a couple of interesting items in this back seat. One, you have climate vents back here, which is pretty nice for a car like this. You even have climate control temperature. This little wheel lets you adjust from cold to hot. You don't get to adjust the amount of climate control like the fan speed, but I will take climate vents and a temperature adjuster, especially in the back of a little car like this. You don't usually see that. Now, you can also see back here you have USB-C ports for device charging, which is a nice modern device charging situation in the back of this car. Other than the stuff in the center, though, not really all that much interesting about this back seat, although I must say it too has a materials quality advantage over the Golf R. One of my complaints about the Golf R's materials was that they cheaped out in the back seat, and a great example of that was on the door panel. You can see the front door panels had simply higher quality materials than the back door panels. They had specifically decontented the rear doors just to save a few bucks, and it was cynical and it looked bad. They didn't do that in the S3. You can see the door panels still have the same quality, same materials, same trim, which is obviously nicer, and the back seats have the same quilted leather as you had up front, which also looks very nice, very luxurious, even though these back seats probably won't get used all that often. It's the mark of a luxury car. But anyway, next we move around back in the S3, and it is worth pointing out again, the S3 is not as practical as the Golf R. By being a sedan with a trunk instead of a hatchback with a cargo area, the S3 just has a little disadvantage here. But it should be pointed out that the S3's trunk is pretty big. You pop it open and you can see it's a fairly large trunk, especially for a compact car like this. It has some pretty good space. Although, I should point out that the trunk is sort of disappointingly basic for a couple reasons. One, there's no trunk-mounted releases back here to fold down the back seat. You don't have like a latch you can pull to unlatch the back seat so you can fold it down. The back seat does fold down, but most new cars where I'm getting the trunk, they have a latch back here here you can pull, and it just pops the back seats down, and that would be nice to have here. It's also a little bit disappointing that there's no under trunk floor storage back here. So many new cars have that, but if you lift up the floor in the S3's trunk, the battery is here. Now they do that for weight distribution to make the car less front heavy, and so from a performance perspective, that's a good thing, but it'd be nice to have underfloor storage so you can keep items separated if you want to, like so many cars offer. But anyway, next up, since I'm outside the S3, I want to talk over the exterior a little more generally, specifically the design and style of this car. Frankly, I really like it, and I like the Golf R also for the same reason. It's subtle, it's simple. This is a fun, fast performance car, but it doesn't shout to everybody how fast it is with all sorts of scoops and inlets and wings like some of these cars do. It's nice and subtle and simple and frankly beautiful, and I think this car looks great, and the Golf R does too. These are some of the better looking kind of compact performance cars of the modern era. And one other really important thing that I absolutely love about this car is the sizing is just perfect. In fact, this car kind of reminds me of a modern take on the old school B5 Audi S4. The S4 everybody loved, that was sold at the end of the 90s and the early 2000s. That car was 177 inches long and it had 270 horsepower. Now, the new Audi S4 is also a great car and it's become way more powerful, but it's also gotten bigger. The latest S4 is almost a foot longer than that old school B5 S4. But this car is 177 inches long, just like the old B5, and it has 306 horsepower, even more than the B5 S4. This feels like the revival of that very famous Audi from back then, the modern take on the B5 S4. Let's just hope this turns out to be a little more reliable. But anyway, next up, looking at a few interesting details on the outside of this car. For one, in back you have quad exhaust. 4 different exhaust tips back here, makes it look like a cool, sporty, high-performance car, which is a neat look to have. And speaking of the quad exhaust, well, for one thing, all 4 of the exhaust pipes are connected. You can see under the car, yes, they are a real quad exhaust system. Audi and other brands have tried in the past to get away with like half of the exhaust being fake, but that isn't the case here. But anyway, speaking of the quad exhaust, they sound, well, okay, sporty-ish, like you might expect for this car. Take a listen. And next up, these wheels are also interesting. They're not especially beautiful or performance-y, but they look fine. The quirky part is that they say Audi Sport on them, just once in red on the side of the wheel, just so everybody really knows this is a sport Audi. Also interesting with this car is the way the turn signals work in back. I absolutely love these sweeping turn signals. You can see them here. They are beautiful and eye-catching, and it's a really cool thing to do to make even your turn signals look cool. Now, in the past, I've told you that Audi wasn't able to offer true sweeping turn signals on US market cars because our regulation says that a large portion of the turn signal must light up on its first click, basically. But Audi has figured out an interesting way around that. If you look closely when these turn signals are on, you can see that the entire turn signal lights up with each flash, but just dimly, and that satisfies the regulation. And then the brighter part, the sweeping part, can do its thing sort of on top of the dim turn signal. Take a close look and you can see the dim part lights up with each flash, and then the sweeper goes across, and they figured out a neat way around that kind of stupid regulation, so we get our cool sweeping turn signals. And so those are the quirks and features of the new Audi S3. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the new S3. Now, I know that some people watching, oh, it's not the RS3. I'll get to the RS3, but the S3 has a pretty good place in the enthusiast world. If you want something that's like sporty and fun, but you don't necessarily want to spend the big money or get the crazy power and performance of the RS3, this car has a pretty good compromise. And years ago, I owned a 2001 Audi A4, a B5 A4, and like I was saying about the B5 S4, it's that right size. Like, that car was so popular and so desirable back then, I think it's reasonable that like a cool sporty car the same size is still a desirable vehicle, and it certainly is to me. So let's talk S3. Now, just like the Golf R, I think the powertrain is fantastic, very punchy, very exciting. You step on it and it moves. and it's surprisingly quick. 0 to 60 in like 4.5, 4.6 seconds. That is a strong figure for any car, obviously, and it's pretty nice for a car like this, only sort of the mid-performance car in this lineup. And also when you're accelerating, the other thing is it sounds reasonably good from inside the car. Now, it doesn't sound that great on the outside in that rev clip I showed you, in part because for some reason when Audis rev in park, they're limited to like 3,000 RPM or 4,000 RPM, so you can never really hear them all that well. When you're inside the car, you do get more sound, but it's not like exceptionally muscular or growly. It ultimately just sounds like a 2-liter 4-cylinder. But I don't think a lot of people are buying this car for the sound. I think they kind of know the score when they're buying it, that it's not going to sound like a real muscle car. The really cool thing about this car, in addition to the acceleration being quite astonishingly nice, is the handling is fantastic. And I said this in the Golf R review as well, and this car drives a lot like the Golf R. The steering is good, very communicative and precise, especially for a vehicle based on a front-wheel drive car, and I'm pretty impressed with the way that this steers and the way that this handles. I think it's very well balanced. I think it's surprisingly comfortable for a pretty good handling car, which is not always easy to do. A lot of cars I drive, GT3s and Porsches and stuff like that, they handle incredibly, but it really comes at the sacrifice of ride quality. Obviously, this doesn't handle like those, but it's still, it holds its own, and it's a reasonably comfortable and nice car. Now, steering precision isn't quite what it is in like an RS6 or an RS7 or a real true sports car, and the handling there, you do feel a little bit of body roll, maybe a little bit of understeer, but we're not talking about, it's still quite good considering what this car is, and I'm pretty impressed with it from a steering, handling, and drivability perspective. Really though, to me, what sticks out about this car is it's a pretty good deal. I was lamenting the fact in the Golf R review that the Golf R cost so much money, and I'm still kind of surprised. In fact, when I saw that this car was only $2,000 more expensive base price, I checked like 4 times. Like, really? Okay, I went on their websites. Really? This is okay? In order to really sell it to me. Like, this car, to me, offers quite a few more advantages. The Audi badge is the biggest advantage that's going to sell this car to the most people. There are a lot of people out there, oh, I wouldn't buy a car because of badge. I would only buy it because it's the best. Yeah, well, why didn't you buy a Kia Stinger? That car would have sold more if that was really true. People want the Audi badge, and so you pay $2,000 more, which is really not all that much. To get the Audi badge, to get better infotainment. The Golf R's infotainment and climate control setup has been universally criticized, and you get a better interior. And the latest Golf R's interior has also been fairly well criticized, and I don't really see quite as many of those problems in the S3. It still could be nicer in here, but it's better than the Golf R. You only lose the hatchback and the manual transmission, and the manual's a big deal. If you want a manual car, that's it. That's the ball game. It doesn't matter all the drawbacks of the Golf R, you get the Golf R. The hatchback thing I think I could live with in order to have an Audi spend only $2,000 more and get a better place to sit, frankly, where you're spending all your time. Frankly, I think that this car checks a lot of boxes for a lot of people. It's little, and so it's good for city driving. It's nice and compact. You can park it anywhere, and it's fun, and it's fast, and it handles well, and it's got a lot of nice sporty benefits, but it's also like a nice car. It's got, heated seats, dual zone climate control, all sorts of nice cameras and technology, the screen and the gauge cluster. Now, obviously, I'm very excited to drive the RS3 because that's the ultimate cool, incredible vehicle, but if you're not spending that money, or if you don't just need that stuff, this car offers a pretty nice compromise, and I think it compares quite favorably to a Golf R, as long as you won't miss the hatchback or the stick shift. And so that's the new 2022 Audi S3. This is a pretty desirable sedan, relatively sporty, fun to drive, exciting, nice looking, good tech, and it solves a lot of the problems that I have with the new Volkswagen Golf R. Anyway, now it's time to give the new S3 a DOUGSCORE. And the DOUGSCORE is here, 61 out of 100, which places the new S3 in a good spot against its competition. You'll note the new S3 also ties the Volkswagen Golf R, but it's important to keep in mind the Golf R gets 2 extra points for practicality. So the S3 is better overall unless you need that hatchback cargo space. If you do, get the Golf R. Otherwise, the S3 is a more compelling choice with good power, nice styling, and a better interior than many rivals, including the Golf R.